Today's episode of the Mind Sculptors podcast is brought to you by TCG Player, your source for all your trading card game needs. Please consider using our link in the description for your next purchase, as it helps support the continued refinement of our show. This episode is also made possible through the gracious support of our Patreon members. If you wish to join this esteemed group, simply visit patreon.com/The Mind Sculptors and become part of the SCULPTY family today. And of course, if you prefer a simpler gesture, we invite you to subscribe, leave a like and comment on YouTube, or leave a review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts as a most fitting offering to the ever-watchful algorithm Jesus.
Welcome, everybody, to the Mind Sculptors podcast,
where
I am Cal.
And I'm Ian. This is the podcast where we never step on each other's toes during the introduction.
Nope,
we
never.
have everything scripted. We don't improv a word.
We used to have a scripted intro.
We used to have a scripted intro.
Yeah.
Maybe that's why we used to have a scripted intro, actually.
Yeah. Well, it was like with Morgan and Cobble and like that group. They were like, oh, we need a scripted intro and all this stuff. It was like very like, Into the North-esque. And, now that it's us two, it really reflects the craziness that is our brains.
Yeah. Firing off the hip.
It has been a few weeks since we have been on the air. How you doing, buddy? What's going on?
Well, as many people know, the reason for our absence is because I got married. So that's pretty cool. Yes, very happy about that. It's been awesome. Had a lovely little celebration in lovely Las Vegas. And now we're here,
Are you used to the ring yet? How is that going?
The ring transition is good. I did spend a day recently not wearing it because I went right to work and left it downstairs, and now reintegrating, I feel weird once again. So
yeah,
it's been an ebb and flow type of thing, but it's definitely.
How have you enjoyed shuffling cards with the ring?
I will say it's a pain in the ass. Yeah. A little bit. I'm not gonna lie.
It has been my like biggest thing, where when I'm like at a tournament, I'll like tell Cassidy, I'm just like, there is like a non-zero chance that I get really irritated with my ring and take it off in the middle of this because it's pissing me off.
It's based. Yeah, for sure.
Oh my goodness. While you were gone, I was doing not magic stuff. I've two things. One, a new Crusader Kings 3 DLC came out in that time. Cons of the Step has been excellent. I'm not going to try and like talk too much about this, but I do want to talk about it briefly because it's like they completely reworked the game. Basically, like the game is like effectively a whole new game. So it's been very fun. The funny thing to me, though, that I do want to talk a little bit about is Marvel Snap released their new like card that was like their season pass card. And the reason I want to talk about this is because they don't know how to say the word cuckoo. I have had I pulled it up here and it's spelled like this, right?
And people say cuckoo.
Yeah, they'll be like, I don't know if I'm supposed to say that on YouTube or whatever. And I'm like, guys, it's cuckoo. I don't know if you've ever heard of a little movie called One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Yeah. The bird. Hold on. Let's pull up the bird that it is named after, because it's literally a bird. A cuckoo bird.
It's a bird that likes watching other birds make love.
Oh my gosh. But literally I have like, because I'll like have like Twitch on watching like some Marvel Snap content while I'm like doing stuff. and working.
Mhm.
And they'll just be like, Esme Cuckoo, Cuckoo. And I'm just like, guys, it's cuckoo. It is, it's a cuckoo bird. Like she's named after like her in if you're not familiar with the lore of the cuckoos, Esme Cuckoo is one of like 7 I think it's 7 clones of Emma Frost.
Oh, fun.
And kind of the like like the gimmick with them is that they're really weird and they're kind of reminiscent of like paying homage in a little bit. Those like weird characters from like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Sure.
So like that is the basis of this. Come on, like we can. It's a cool card though, but anyway,
yeah.
I needed to talk about that because I have been going nuts with hearing people just be like, Cuckoo, Coco, can I say that on YouTube? Like, come on, guys. Like, it's not that hard.
You can say cuck on YouTube.
Believe it or not, you can.
Hell yeah.
But today we're
simp, right?
What do you say?
Twitch. You can't say simp on Twitch, but you can say cuck. I'm pretty sure.
Probably.
Yeah.
Probably.
I remember specifically going on a couple Twitch streams and they're like, you dog, whatever you do, you can say a lot of shit, but don't say it's simp. And I was like, what? Okay.
Anyway, today we are going to be talking about the cEDH metagame. We're not doing a power rankings because the schedule for us has been like kind of all over the place.
Yeah.
So we're at a place where we don't have like a full month or like several months to like go off of because of the time of the month it is. And also like we're in the middle of preview season, so we can't really talk about Final Fantasy that much right now, even though like the full Commander set's been spoiled. But all of that, we're going to actually take a look at some of the newer faces ? I don't know that like some of these aren't necessarily new faces per se, but they're like emerging powerhouses, I think is like a good way of describing it. And you talked about this on your most recent video on your channel.
Yep.
Of you were going through just like a bunch of different tournaments. You guys should go watch that video. And like, give us kind of an idea of like what's going on in the metagame right now with like all of these different decks that are kind of popping up.
Yeah. So there's a lot of crazy shit going on in the cEDH meta right now, right? One thing we're seeing entirely is what I've been calling like the counter mid-range meta, right? And so there's this obvious like narrative that everyone's very aware of at this point, right? Where everyone's like, oh, you know, mid-range hell, right? But what we're very clearly seeing from the metagame is now that there is a almost backlash to mid-range hell that we're basically categorizing as like the turbo, non-turbo decks, right? So the way I would describe those is the Rals of the world, the Etalis of the world, right? Etali has won 6 tournaments in the past 2 months.
Etali's been on a tear.
Yeah, not and to be clear, like not top cutted 6 tournaments. Etali has won 6 tournaments in the past couple months, right? So like absolutely fucking buck wild, right? And if you like, you're looking at the year stats there on your screen, right? But if you bring that down to like a 3-month period, it is insane how effective that deck has been.
Jesus,
right? Yeah, like it's actually crazy. And those are like, that's not even to mention what happens if you filter down to smaller events where it's been doing it on like 30 and 40 person tournaments as well. So like, we are having especially Cam, obviously, and Robert are 2 of the people really pushing hard for it, right? Is just top cut after top cut after top cut after top cut from these decks. And, you know, the Ral deck winning the 5K at Cool Stuff, right? 120 person tournament. Ral comes in and says, yeah, I'm going to flip some coins and you guys are dead, right? These very proactive decks are basically looking at this metagame where everyone's going, well, yeah, you set up your draw engines and you tap out for the first 3 turns and going, you sure about that? And, now there's sort of two highlights, right? Is one is these counter meta decks, right? And two, the other highlight is the pivot decks, right? The decks that can play in the long game and the decks that can assert those early wins if given the right windows, right?
Mhm.
Those decks are basically like your Rograk Thrasios, your Blue Farms, your decks like that, right? Also, for those who haven't been like following the trends on what it means to be a Thrasios deck in the modern metagame, especially
It's
a 3-color,
completely different.
it's a whole different thing, right? So if you're like, yeah, I know what Rog Thras does. They lost Oxide and now they use Kin and Basalt. No. That is not what those decks are. Imagine playing red just for Breach and Song of Creation. That's your whole deck.
Yeah. No, it's really interesting how a lot of these decks have evolved.
Yeah.
Let's start with some of the decks we're a little bit more familiar with.
Sure.
So it were. So recently, let's look at the deck that won the Heisenberg Redemption event.
The Rog Thras, right?
Yeah, the Rog Thras deck here. And, since we were just talking about Rog Thras, again, what is going on with some of these decks? Because, like you said, people will be like, oh, they're doing stuff with Kinnan, they're doing stuff, with that. And if you look at this deck list, there's a stunning lack of Kinnan. There's a stunning lack of Basalt Monolith, but I see Growing Rights of Itlimoc. I see Song of Creation and Candelabra. And I think the most notable odd card that I see here is fucking Chatterstorm. Like,
yeah, which,
what
by
is
the
going
way,
on?
MVP.
I fully believe it. Like, I mean, and so the idea with these, if I'm correct, is these are Turbo Cradle decks,
yes,
correct?
Yes. Gaia's Cradle is the name of the game with this archetype, right? You are trying to tap your cradles for literally an exhausting amount of mana by just accruing value after accruing value after accruing value after accruing value, right? You are trying to press your value or mana advantage to the point in which you are just sending. Basically, you're going to end up in situations where, and I mean, the highlight card, as much as it is Gaia's Cradle, it's also just a Boro Breeze Caller, right? And I think that is the card that defines this archetype.
Yeah.
So basically, because of the relationship between Thrasios and Breeze Caller, right? You're basically paying 2, you're bouncing one of your lands back to your hand, and then you're untapping your Gaia's Cradle, right? So as soon as you're getting like 6-7 mana out of these interactions, now you're activating Thrasios, you're putting another land into play, you're activating this ability again, you're starting to net mana as you go through these loops, and you're just digging and digging and digging further into your deck, right? And so yes, sometimes we're talking about having 6 or 7 mana, right? But then you start playing things like Chatterstorm, and now all of a sudden, oh wait, I've gone through and played a couple spells this turn. I have 8 creatures on the battlefield. I'm tapping my Cradle for 10 mana, right? It's getting to the point where these decks are, sort of a 2-part system. 1, they're playing the Thrasios grind engine, right? Sure. But 2, the real game plan is put bodies on the field, grab a Cradle, start doing nonsense, right? And that's where it goes from there. And I've seen a lot of people, when they first look at this archetype, go, well, why are they playing so many green tutors? Like, what if I've heard a lot of people ask if you can transition this archetype into like a Tymna Thrasios shell, for example, right? But this is one of those weird decks where it actually is better the lower colors you're on, right? So for example, if you look at these Rog Thras builds, they're playing about 5-ish red cards. So right now, for example, the build we're looking at has like Gamble, Wheel of Fortune,
Flare.
Well, yeah. So we don't count Flare and Swat because you don't actually spend mana to cast those.
Sure.
And then it goes to Breach and Song, right? And that's it.
Yeah.
That's really all these decks play as far as red spells, right? And the rest of it is just green-blue. And that allows you the luxury of playing things like, for example, the Urza Saga there, which will fetch your Expedition map, or your Minamo, which untaps your Cradle, or specifically probably the best card in the deck as far as lands goes to support Cradle, Deserted Temple, right? Now all of these pieces don't negatively affect your mana base, right? These are pieces that you actively want to be searching for and playing. And I hear people all the time going like, oh, do you think you maybe have too many land tutors in this archetype? And it's like, no, well, because you have lands after your lands, right? It's like, oh no, I'll have to go grab my Mysterized Village or my Shifting Woodlands or my Deserted Temple. Like none of these are problems. Or we go to the point where then you start comboing with Talon Gates of Madara. So for those who don't know, if you have Breeze Caller, a Cradle that can tap for, I believe, 6, Cradle for 6, Breeze Caller, Talon Gates, that is just infinite mana and infinite mana in a way in which your opponents can only use targeted removal to stop you. There's no counter spells to stop that, right? So it's pretty big, right?
Yeah. No, I think that is one of the things about this that I think like is really important to understand with this, is because this is effectively in some way, I don't want to compare it to a deck like Tamiyo, because Tamiyo is a lands deck in a like very different way.
Yeah.
But I mean, this is a lands deck, right? I mean, like, this is a deck that wins because of the lands that you play. And, you know, you play all of these.
You meant?
What did I say?
Tamiyo.
Oh, I meant Tatiova. Regardless,
you're good.
You know, the idea being, you know, you're playing this lands strategy, and, you know, the red splash here, you know, I think you probably could make an argument that you could do this in Thras Timna, but I think like you end up dilating or diluting the quality of your cards.
Yeah.
Because now you have to, you know, well, now we're in black and now we're in white. And so we need this card and this card. And then you're like, you know, there are disadvantages to being in more colors, right?
True. And like all of these green tutors are very intentionally chosen in this archetype because you can use your excess green for Cradle, right? Your other pips come at an extreme premium when you play this archetype, right? So it is very important to remember that like when you're air quotes storming, right, with this archetype, that is exactly the kind of stuff you need. Speaking of Tatiova, real quick side talk. When Final Fantasy comes out, Tatiova got one of its best tools it's maybe ever gotten.
For sure. I saw that card. I saw Ben Maben do a TikTok on it, and I was just,
double ETB from lands. Insane. Yeah. Anyway.
The other one was the whenever a land or the landfall doubles its power card too. I saw that and I was just like, yeesh.
Interesting. Yeah.
That's gonna do some stuff in Modern, I assume.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and this is the thing. And so like, let's now move over to what is kind of the like companion deck almost to this. The Thrasios Yoshiimaru deck. Actually, do you have a list?
Do I have my list that I got bored with?
Yes, because I don't see it. I think it's because you have to change. There you are. I got it. So we'll just take a look at your list instead. Now, you already did a video on this deck, but just for the people, you know, people go check that out. The idea is very much the same as the deck we just looked at, right? Yes. Like it is very much in the same, you know, the theory behind it is very similar. You're just getting the white silence effects, I feel like is the big get, right?
Yeah. And I'll argue that like one of the big transitions that I made in particular with this archetype is that I definitely wanted to give white more life in the deck, right? Because I definitely felt like if I'm going to play Yoshi, which is like strictly worse than Rog in this archetype, then I have to sort of validate why I'm here, right? And for me, there was twofold, which is part A, which is Esper Sentinel and Archivist of Agma, in my opinion, some of the best draw engines ever. And you can sort of couple Wargate with that because Wargate's a brilliant Gaia's Cradles tutor as well as a super flexible tutor for when you're trying to do your combo stuff.
Right.
And then the potentially more obvious part is part B, which is the silences, right? The voice of victories, your ranger captains, your silence, your like the fact that I was, you know, basically saying like, instead of playing breach, instead of playing, you know, flare or SWAT and stuff like that, what I'd rather just have is this ability to just succinctly close a game, to not have to storm off through a million things, to just go X=2 on my whatever spell, lock it in, let's go, right? And you and I have talked about this, and a couple of other people I've talked to about this in this archetype, where I intentionally left in Derevi and Emil, which I've seen a number of other people playing Yoshi Thras omitting. And I will explicitly say Emil won me multiple games in the deck, being able to combo with either Cloud of Fairies or with Derevi. And I think some people are just basically going like, oh, you don't need it necessarily. You can just storm through it. It's like the people who used to say like, you don't need to play anything other than Praetor's Grasp as a win condition in your breach decks, right? But I think this is even more so, right? I think it's just this hyper focus on card quality to a point where you just end up making worse choices, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And Emil feels like it's like every time I saw it, it won me the game, basically. And multiple times I went out of my way to grab it, and it won me the game on top of stuff, right? Where people were like, oh, yeah, they're kind of sandbagging for these moments. And I was like, great, I'm going to pull in Emil, and I'm going to tap Cradle for 15. And now I have several activations on the stack. Are you dead now? Right? Like,
sandbag through this motherfucker.
literally.
Yeah. No, I think that's really smart. I gotta tell you, these decks speak to me. They remind me in some way to the Nadu decks we saw last year. They feel like they fill very much the same niche.
They do. They fill in the same niche. They're the same. They fall under the same archetypal tree, right? Turbo Cradle dot strategy, Oboro Breeze Collar dot deck, right? But obviously, each has their own permutations, their own assets, right? Like, for example, if you want a more strict mana base, you play the Rog Thras version because you don't have nearly as many white spells here, right? For me, I like the flexibility that white provides. I think Rog Thras is potentially a little bit better with turn order, is something I found, right? I think this deck is a little bit better in the grindier games against other top decks, but I think that, as I mentioned, the turn order thing really hurts this deck a little bit more than it does Rog Thras.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I believe it or not, really like Rog Thras. I just think it, like, as somebody who has been a like known Rog Thras hater.
Yeah, true.
Right.
Yep.
And it's not because I dislike the decks. It's because it was just like, all right, what's this deck doing? You know, how is it actually getting there? Why is it playing Rog? And I feel like it is justified.
Yes,
why it's playing. Like, I think it's very much justified. It's like,
yeah, for a long time it was you play Rog because you play Rog, right? That's not a good reason. I like that we actually have very solid reasonings for why Rograk is the commander of that deck now.
Yeah, I think it's very solid. This is a deck I could see myself playing in like a heartbeat. Like, this is very much up my alley.
Yeah.
Now moving away from these, turbo cradle decks a little bit, and more into something that's a little bit more Cal's speed, so it were.
Sure.
And that's Marneus Calgar has been having a little bit of a renaissance recently.
Yep.
And that is in no small part to Tim Gold Sabertooth, who has just been killing it with this deck recently.
Yeah.
You've got Voice of Victory. You've got the, Ocelot Pride. Phoenix should be happy. Ocelot Pride, getting its due in this format.
Yeah. And honestly, it's really solid in this archetype in particular,
Yeah. So like with Marneus Calgar, what sets, because there are some people who are playing, I don't believe this deck is, but there are people who are playing, Tivit in the 99 of this deck. So like, what is the thought process of like going into something like this, and what are the advantages that Marneus gives you? Yeah,
and I don't know if you'll remember this card that I don't know. It was around before a recent slew of bans, and it was called Doc Ride. Because Portionist, so Dockside killed this deck, right? Like Dockside was the reason that this deck did not exist, right? And then several innovators like Gold Sabertooth realized, wait a minute, now that we're not being punished every 20 seconds for having tokens or playing my deck's strategy, it turns out that's pretty damn good, and you can sort of get away with gaining some incidental and horrifyingly oppressive value over time, right? You can sort of just go, as I've seen Gold do a couple times playing the deck. And first of all, I love his style with this deck, because either A, he's going for completely unprotected Oracle Consult turn 2, or B, he's setting up for the grindiest game possibly imaginable. And there's genuinely nowhere in between.
It's so funny because his, like, one of the things that I like about this deck and what I really like about Tim's deck is it reminds me a lot of like just like Tivit in general, right?
Probably the because in the deck.
Probably the Tivit in the deck, but like the way the deck plays in general, it reminds me of that. And I think right now the way that it's performing, I think that it's probably better than Tivit at the moment. I don't know that I necessarily think the strategy overall is better, but
I mean, mathematically, it is dominating Tivit. Mathematically,
it is dominating right now.
That's for deck right now, like
for sure.
And I think that there's something to be said about like many people are playing Tivit, many people are playing Marneus. Marneus is cleaning up, and Tivit's had one of the worst 3 months in its
very true.
history ever.
Very true.
So I think so. Here's kind of the.
I'm not playing as well.
Yeah, exactly.
No, it's the thing that I think is interesting here, right, is one of the advantages that this deck has over something like Tivit is the cards that in Tivit you wouldn't want to play, like, Stride Hanger Automaton or Ocelot Pride are really good here.
Yeah.
Because in Tivit, they kind of feel like win more almost. Whereas with this, it catapults you forward.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the difference that I see here between them is you get to play those advantage engines and it really puts you forward. And
like when you resolve Smothering Tithe in Tivit, it's very, very good and probably still one of the best cards in the deck. When you resolve a Smothering Tithe and Marneus and then you win the game. Your commander, the game is over. The game is done. You just haven't realized it yet. As it's and I gotta say, like there's some subtle pieces that I didn't really vibe with in this deck until I saw the way that Tim played them, right? And I will shout that out because he really has made this deck his own, right? Like the fact that Volatile and Gilded and Imposter Mech were in the deck, and I was like, wow, this is a lot of steal effects, right? But when you sort of see every time he plays against a Kinnan deck, he's going like, I think I'll just try and Gild the Drake that Kinnan. Try and Volatile Storm Drake that. Straight up in our we had a win-in match during his tournament, the mid-range heaven event, in which we played Imposter Mech and Volatile and Gilded Drake, and all had to be killed because if he took Kinnan, he was going to run away with the game. It was insane. Like it was absolutely buck wild, right?
That's fantastic.
Yeah. So I was like, oh, when you play those cards like that, it starts to change the dynamic of how any of this stuff works. Doesn't.
Yeah, for sure.
And it really, really was a great demonstration of like just taking some of these deck building choices that you're like probably, and this is something I highly recommend for folks in general. If you are seeing deck building choices that you're unfamiliar with or unsure about why they do that, make adjustments so that you're comfortable with the deck that you are playing, right? I cannot stress that enough, hands down, please do. But also, if you have access to the pilots, please ask them, because I guarantee you're not going to be aligned on every understanding of these choices, right?
And that's okay, right? I mean, like even if you look at this other list that we pulled up here, like I mean, this one's playing like Watcher in the Water and isn't playing any of the stuff that like Tim was playing. It's like this one's playing Kimball Profiteering Mayor, right? Like I think that there's a lot of room to play different stuff in this, and I think that's really cool. With these decks.
Absolutely.
The other thing that I want to touch on here while we're looking at them is heading over. We talked about it a little bit ago. But like Ral Monsoon Mage is doing great.
Yep.
And is kind of really showing up in a way. Now, granted, you only got like a handful of pilots here, but those pilots are having like pretty good success with this.
Yeah.
So like, let's open up this list here and take this is very much Blue Red Storm the way Richard Garfield intended it, right? This is Gift Storm, baby. Like that's what it looks like to me,
Yeah. No, I mean, this is a deck that says, all right, everybody, crack knuckles, turn 2, better have it. And I think what highlights this truly the most is, Cal, can you go down to the instance for a second? And look at the top end of the instance. Do you think there's something that we would traditionally associate with cEDH that might be missing? Or several things that might be missing? For example, there's no fucking Force of Will in this deck. There is no Mind Break Trap. There is no Force of Negation. This deck is playing its commander. It is pushing wins. and it is not fucking around, right? Like, I do not want to play the mid-range game, says Ral. I will be playing my spells. I will be
casting Invoke Calamity, please and thank you.
Yeah. Mind Fire, Invoke Calamity, Will of the Jeskai, right? This deck knows what it is. Knows what it's trying to be, and it's not pretending to be something else. And I adore it. This is how you play Storm, everybody.
Yeah, I love this.
Like, especially with 100 card singleton, there are so many ways that you could fuck around and find out. And this deck is just not fucking around. It is getting the job done, you know?
Yeah, no, this is sweet. It kind of reminds me of like Quark Sakashima in a way, where it's doing that classic, is it Storm thing? But this, even more than Quark Saka, feels like the most pure. And that's wild because like the Quark Saka used to feel like it was the pure Is It Storm deck. This is pure Is It Storm.
Yeah.
Like there's no mistake in this. The other thing too we talked about a little bit is Etali's going through a little bit of a hot tear right now. What is it that has changed with Etali recently that has it performing at such a high clip?
I mean, first of all, I think people are just making them have it. I really do think so. I think from what I've been talking about with Cam, who is one of the players who's been winning on the deck pretty aggressively, it's just like he's putting turn twos on the clock. And he's saying, have it or don't. I'm getting you. Like it is really that simple at a certain point, right? There's a decent amount of like spice that you can throw in here and there, right? But like at the end of the day, a lot of the slots are still pretty decently similar with a lot of things. But like, when someone puts a turn 2 Treasonous Ogre into an Etali down, you gotta respect it, and I think that's what we're seeing. Now, I think that there is obviously a very real backlash that can come from that, right? Where, what's up?
Athena's having a good dream. She's wagging her tail in her sleep. It's just the cutest thing I've ever seen. I heard like a knock on the door and I was like, what the fuck? And I look over and it's my dog sleeping, passed out, wagging her tail, looking like she's happy. It's
worthy interruption for sure.
Oh my goodness. That's so cute. Anyhow. So Etali going back through, having a renaissance and,
I was interested to see how it lasts, right? Like, I think there's a certain notion of like, I don't know that Etali can survive being treated like a Rogsai, right? I think is the issue. So I'm curious to see if the narrative starts to shift after that point,
Yeah. I think when we go to do rankings, I think that will be something that like keeps me from ranking it too highly because it'll be like something where it's like, how can it sustain this sort of play? Because it's one of those, and this was one of the things I used to say about Magda too, before Magda figured it out,
right?
Where is Magda able to sustain these type of results over, 6 months, a year, right? And I think that's where, decks like these that tend to be, once they get a little bit more attention, tend to struggle a little bit more.
For sure.
I think, that is a real thing. Granted, I think Etali has just kind of been well positioned. And I think like one of the issues with it tends to be just, fatigue of playing the deck sometimes, right? Like I think like that's its biggest competitor will ultimately be it's the same thing every single game, right? Like there's not a lot of variety with what the deck is doing.
Oh, I disagree there.
Really?
I mean, that's like saying a Storm deck is the same thing every time, right? Storm plays so intricately and so differently every single time, right? Etali is literally a cake of variance, right? That is baked into one.
That's fair. That's fair. Yeah. That's fair. I guess what I'm trying to say, what I'm trying to get at is that like, your initial game plan of getting from point A to point B is going to be very similar in most games. And then like, if you get stopped, you don't have a lot that you can say about it. And I think I think that's like the reasons it kind of like wanes and whatnot. Anyway,
I think the thing is that people don't recognize about Etali though, is that Etali when stopped does way better than like a Rogsai when stopped. Right.
That's true.
Obviously you don't have Ristic Mystic, so that's a huge problem there, right? But like as soon as you get cards in hand, you're often able to send again,
Right.
And it's really good at doing nothing until it does everything.
That's very true. Now it is playing Chandra Flameshaper. Interesting. What is kind of the idea behind this?
And the middle ability is a Twin Flame.
Is that literally it? It's just a 7 mana Twin Flame. All right.
It's a 7 mana Twin Flame. Yep.
All right.
That's it. High redundancy of Twin Flames makes the deck better. Yeah. No, that was one that I very personally have been dying on the hill of like, dear God, please don't tell me we actually have to play this. And everyone's been like, yeah, sorry, buddy. It's actually really good. So I've recently picked up a copy. I've conceded to the community.
That's funny.
Yeah.
What other decks that are there other decks that are kind of popping up right now that you like want to highlight while we're talking about this? Because we've hit the big things that like I'm thinking of, but
yeah. That's a wild way to put me on the spot without any preparation, Cal.
I know. Deal with it. I don't know what to tell you. I will say something that I do think is really interesting. This isn't totally on topic, but it's something I think is just generally interesting is how awful Hashaton has turned out to be.
Yeah.
This was a deck that we were like, oh, this is going to be a problem. And then it is.
No, I know for sure. People have been quoting me on I said it's Nadu levels of good for sure.
Yeah.
That one's going to get rubbed in my face for a long time, I think.
Well, listen, when your job is to make takes, when your job is to have takes on everything.
Yeah. Sometimes it's going to be wrong.
You're going to swing and miss, right?
Yeah.
And I think we took a swing on this one and we're wrong. But it is what it is.
What the fuck? Why is my Ashton Top Cut not on there? I guess that SCG wasn't recorded, but there's another SCG on there as well. Okay, sure.
This is one of the things that I will continue to tell people about EDH Top 16 is you have to take these numbers with like a huge grain of salt
because there are things missing. Yeah.
I mean, there's just like giant holes in its data where like some events, half the decks aren't even populated. And so it's like, all right, well, what are we actually learning from this information?
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, like I have people who will send my record to me all the time to like try and be like, oh, you're bad. But like half of my results aren't on there.
I would say most of your top results aren't on there, to be honest.
No, literally all of my top results are not on there. So, that is kind of the issue with it. Right. But
in MB, how it do? Okay, here's what I want to talk about.
Okay,
let's talk about Heliod.
Yeah. This is a deck that is kind of sat on the edge of the meta for a while.
Do you know what its conversion rate in the past 3 months has been?
Oh, I'm looking at it right now. Holy shit.
That's a year, but go to 3 months.
Holy shit. What the fuck?
It's a 47% conversion rate.
Excuse me?
I will throw out, and this is very important to note,
does drop down.
Many people who play this deck are specialists. And we are also talking about a deck that
we're talking about an Azorius deck.
Yeah, but it's only been played 21 times in 60 plus person tournaments. That being said, a 47% conversion rate is bunkers, right?
That's really good.
Also, as you filter down to, if you go to 32 plus person tournaments, it's 40 entries and still almost a 40% conversion rate.
These are the type of numbers that we would like on our power rankings would be like, shit, this is like one of the best decks, right? Like, I mean, that is, those are great numbers. Now, the question will be, how long can it sustain?
Of course,
this sort of thing, right? Yeah. Like that'll always be the question with us. But like, let's hop into this. Have you
ever played against a good Heliod pilot?
Yes, I have.
Yeah.
Yes, I have. They're very good.
Yes. So let's talk about that.
Unfortunately, my experience has been against my particular build of Tivit. my deck just has answers upon answers upon answers to everything.
Oh yeah, you're a particularly bad matchup for that deck, I think.
Yeah.
Let's talk about what a good Heliod looks like, right? And not just like looking at results and being like day one is good, right? Let's talk about play patterns, right? Because I think I would love to highlight Smalls' list if we can.
Who is Smalls?
If you back up, there's a person named Smalls, and I'd love for you to click on that link.
Oh, I see it now. Okay.
Because this was 7th place at the Fishbowl, right? So
this motherfucker has it. Oh my gosh, this is the worst. Why would you ever do this to me?
Knowing Smalls, this makes sense.
This is evil.
Let's talk about. Oh my God, Cal, for fuck's sake.
There we go. Just talk. I'll deal with it. Okay.
So what is it to be a Heliod deck, right? I think the thing you have to recognize with this deck is like step one. Don't let it flip if you're playing against it. If you let it flip, you're in a lot of trouble. That's realistically the case. I've also seen the nightmare scenario where someone flips a Heliod and then the opponent follows up with the Fimage and then it gets real bad real quick, right? But so the flip side of Heliod reduces all of your spells generic mana value equal to the amount of cards your opponents have drawn in total, all of them this turn, right? And it gives all of your spells flash, right? As we all know, flash very good in this meta, blah, 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 right? When you are taking 5, 6, 7 mana off of your spells, super does not matter that you are playing effects that let your opponents also draw cards. When you are drawing, playing cards like Prosperity, or Time Twister. And the best part about it is when the deck doesn't even have to resort to those and everyone else is doing the mid-range grind fest. Right? Yeah,
people are just like landing a Ristic and sitting there.
I love watching. So Yuhas is a local of mine. And the amount of times I've seen him just like kind of play a very aggressive control game in the early game. And then people go to resolve a Ristic and then everyone looks at him as if he's going to answer it. And he's like, no. And just lets it stick is so funny because the deck just immediately converts to, oh, cool, now I'm online, right? And one of the play patterns that I feel like never gets talked about with this deck that's like insanely good is just keep a Mystic Remora hand. Doesn't really have a whole lot following it up. All right, cool. On turn X, play Heliod, pick up the Mystic Remora, play it again past the turn.
Mm-hmm.
It just works so well, and I've seen them get away with it so often. But genuinely, I've played against a lot of really good Heliod pilots, and the key to the name of the game in that deck is you play control until you very much do not, right?
Yeah.
And it's tough because it's one of those decks where you really do need them as a control player to keep you alive for a lot of the game, right? But you also got to recognize, and I think every Heliod pilot does have a tell after you play them for a while, when they make the transition, right? When they are going from the person who is getting answers to stop you losing to the person who is actively killing you at this moment in response to someone else's bullshit.
I love that it plays paradoxical outcome. That's just, anytime I see paradoxical outcome in a deck list, my heart gets really happy.
Well, the crazy part about PO in this deck list, right? Like PO in most decks is like, okay, yeah, you pick up your zeros and then play them again, right? You can pick up your fucking coveted jewels in this deck and play it again because guess what? You probably have a reduction of 5 or 6 on all your
pick up that Phyrexian Metamorph, baby. Like
I've seen it. yeah, it's a lot of crazy stuff.
Pick up that Chromatic Ori.
yeah. No, I've straight up seen someone play playing Heliod play Hullbreaker Horror for blue. Someone cast a spell in response, and then they flashed in a Mox, and they bounced their own Hullbreaker Horror and played it again for blue. It's so silly when the deck works, right? So if you're an opponent, don't let them flip unless you really need them. But honestly, they can play.
Even then, you probably don't really need them that much, right? Like,
a lot of the stuff they're flashing in really isn't getting you as many answers as you need. That's how they go from reactive to proactive, right? Yep. So if you can keep them playing control, great. That's where you want them, right? But don't let them turn the corner.
God, this deck is so wild.
Yeah.
Oh, it plays Mishra's Workshop. God, I fucking love this.
Yeah. You would love this deck, actually. I'm 99% sure.
Yeah. This deck, and like the current iteration of like Rog Thras feel very much me coded.
Yeah.
These are very right up my alley. So, but No, I mean, like this is going to be interesting when we go to do our like power rankings here at the end of the month, because like the format has taken such a wild turn over the past like 3 months.
It's wide, that's yeah. I really think it's gotten bigger, right? Which is great. I love that.
I do too.
Some other decks to shout out. Got to shout out one of my clients, Anthony, for putting up a couple results on Master of Keys. Very, very cool list.
Yeah,
and it's been doing really well with that. I'll never forget the day that I convinced him to put in Sarah Sanctum into the list, and he's been like, "Dude, it cooks so hard." So that's been pretty sick. Yeah, you got it up there. And the deck's just kind of wild. It's like it's Esper, but it's very much not Esper at the same time, which is really, really cool.
Yeah.
Does a lot of crazy stuff. And then obviously Gifts gave that deck a little bit of a booster shot too, which is pretty sweet.
I gotta say, I feel so glad that our take on Gifts was just 100% correct. Like it was just
I do feel so as well. Yeah. I feel very, very vindicated by the way that that's been playing out. Honestly, it looks exactly as we thought, which is just like Gifts is not going to make Blue Farm infinitely better. A lot of Blue Farm decks that I've seen from competent pilots aren't even really playing it. And if they are, they're like, yeah, it's a tool in the toolbox, right? Like they're not, no one's bugging out about it,
It's not nitrous oxide, right?
Yeah.
Like you're not like hitting the NOS can with Gifts Ungiven.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly how I would describe it.
But it does feel like NOS in some like lower color decks, I will say. Like there are some lower color decks where I'm like, this really changes the math on a lot.
Like for example, Tameshi, I know those decks are loving it, right?
Dude, Tameshi, I feel like Tameshi might be one of the most underrated decks in the format.
Yes, I believe that's Jason Baird's entire narrative. Yeah. No, I completely agree. Tameshi is an extremely powerful deck and also an extremely underrated deck at the current moment. Yeah.
Yeah. I think like maybe one of the hardest parts about it is I think it's like maybe a little bit harder to play. And I think that might be like the thing holding Tameshi back, right?
Yeah.
Is I think like you have to be real familiar with it and know what you're doing with it to get like full, mileage out of it. But like, I don't know, it just plays like a lot of really good cards, and gets to play some stuff that you don't really get to play in other decks, like Lotus Bloom,
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think there's a lot of crazy stuff there. As I said, Gifts really just gave this deck a lot of life, although it seemed like the version that you have.
This is one from a few months ago.
Oh, a few minutes ago. Yeah, I know Naystrom took a little bit of a hiatus, so I know he's back and knuckle cracking to get back in the brewing room.
Yeah. No, it's wild. But I mean, like as far as like brewing goes, I mean, like with your clients, like I assume you've just got to be like doing all sorts of stuff as far as brewing goes.
I think a lot of people, rightly so, are very excited for Final Fantasy. I think as soon as that becomes available for people, I think June is going to get very wild with that set.
When does that set fully come out? That's like end of May, right?
June 13th, right?
Okay.
Yeah. Which is definitely, I think everyone's like, oh yeah, we're in the middle of spoilers. It's coming out right now, right? And then they're like, no, not exactly, actually.
Right.
But that being said, I think the set is looking very potent. I'm expecting at minimum VV to be an amazing commander. And that's the minimum. I mean, Kefka is going to be fucking sick too, right? Like, I think there's going to be a lot of really cool stuff from that set that's already been spoiled.
I don't know if you saw or not, but Cloud is very much a Callahan card.
It says equipment on it.
Well, specifically because it's like a stone blade with upside.
Yes. Yeah.
Is very, very me coded.
Yeah. I was like, double GTA triggers. Okay, sure. All right. Yeah. Okay.
Double SoFi triggers.
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
Like I genuinely think like double GTA in cEDH is actually enough to like validate it, right? Because like you can
100%
4 charges on that, and then you can neg 1 up to 4 targets, or compounding onto 1 at minimum. I think there's some real shit going on there for sure.
No, I fully agree. Like, just to like show some people like what the card we're talking about.
It is not on your screen currently.
I know. I'm pulling it up. it enters the battlefield, has the Stone Blade effect, but then it also doubles Cloud's triggers and triggers double equipment if he's equipped. And the thing that's really cool with that is the card that I have talked a lot about as a really good equipment is pre-war formal wear.
Yep.
Ends up being you get 2 tutors with Cloud when you use this to put Cloud into play, which is really cool. So this is one of the, I got tagged so much with this card. I got like a bunch of people being like, hey Cal.
Yeah.
So I think there's some stuff that's really exciting. We're going to talk about this more when we do our review here in the next few weeks. But overall, Ian, what are your feelings about the format right now? Like we were talking about how it's wide.
Yeah.
With it being so wide as it is right now, does that make it so that like the top decks are that much better, or is it feel like an even playing field to you?
Yeah. And so like, that's a really good question, because I think last format, right, if we take it pre-ban, I think the format was wide as far as like tier 2 decks, but then there was a tier 0 that just absolutely waffles.
That felt very much stronger.
Yeah, absolutely. And right now, I think the settings on the pyramid of however you see the format, I think it's a lot more even than it previously looks. Now, I think like white cards right now are very good, right? I think Voice of Victory was a really big upgrade for those archetypes, and I think there's some really broken stuff that decks like Rog Thras can do if you don't stop them, right?
Yeah.
This is the interesting part of this format, which is like meta knowledge and understanding of these decks' faults is explicitly what's going to keep the tiers even, right? So if you let some of the better decks or the more consistent decks do their bullshit without impeding them, then yeah, they're going to walk all over the pod, right? But when it comes to the games where people are interacting at the right times, where they're basically using their card knowledge, using their political prowess to play in the right windows, then I think the format looks really flat in comparison, right? Like, and I've had people who are like, going off about how Blue Farm doesn't even feel like the top deck right now, even though it's a deck that's consistently performing, right? Like there's a lot of really interesting conversations about the top dog, what it is. And I think if that's a nuanced conversation, then that means the format is doing healthy, right? If no one can confidently say, yes, this deck's doing really well, but it's 100% the best thing to be doing, I think that's a good place for the format to be in, right? And
I think that's a pretty good spot.
Yeah, like I think you can say like Tim Necrom and Kinnan and decks like that are higher up in the format, right? But even then, there's arguments that like, yeah, but those are known quantities, right? Kinnan sometimes just gets hated out of pods, right? Like there's a lot of nuance and subtlety to a lot of these more intimate or intricate questions,
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think I really like where the format's at right now.
Yeah,
I think there's a lot of cool stuff that you can be doing. We didn't even touch on Glarb and its impact in the meta, and part of that has to do with the fact that we have talked ad nauseum about that deck on this channel.
We've talked a lot about
so we don't need more Glarb posting, unfortunately. But that being said, if people would like to get your expertise, your your political prowess to help them improve their game, where can people do that?
Yeah, so if you're interested in getting some cEDH coaching from yours truly, a quick 10-second resume, one of the longest grinders in this format. I've also got more wins on different decks and different archetypes than anyone else rocking cEDH. So if you're interested in getting some of that cEDH knowledge in you can email me at comedianmtg@gmail.com or any of the places in my link tree. I've also dropped rates recently because we are in a bit of a tough time economically, and I am trying to respect that and make what I do something that people can get into. I really want people to have access to this coaching, and it's something that I care about very deeply. So drop rates so that folks can come in and sign up and not feel like, it's something that they don't have access to.
Right.
So if you're interested in that, reach out to me at any of those places. As I mentioned, comedianmtg@gmail.com or any of the places in my link tree that Cal is nice enough to link.
Of course. We love that we have the Ian champion I don't know why I said it like that. That was such a weird way of saying it.
It was perfect and great and nothing wrong with it. Also, a quick shout out. We are doing my other channel, Dice and Daydreams, which is our TTRPG channel. Our second campaign will have dropped its first episode as of last Wednesday, and that's the one where I'm GMing. So it'll be fun.
Ooh.
Yeah, it's a game of Honey Heist, so it's 90% improv banter and a lot of jokes.
Sounds right up my alley. I am excited for everything that we've got coming up here in the future. Again, here on the channel, things have been a little slower because, Ian's got stuff going on. Yeah. I've been busy playing Crusader Kings. But yeah, we're still cooking. We're still going to be bringing you stuff. Hopefully soon we will have a Power Rankings episode coming out for you guys. So with all that being said, I'm Cal.
I'm Ian.
And we'll see you next time. Stay sculpty, everybody.